enlightenment. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. For all who want to train on the bodhisattva path, I have written the 37 practices of bodhisattvas, following what has been said by the excellent ones on the meaning of the sutras, tantras, and treatises. Though not poetically pleasing to scholars, owing to my poor intelligence and lack of learning, I have relied on the sutras and the words of the excellent, so I think these bodhisattva practices are without error. However, as the great deeds of bodhisattvas are hard to fathom for one of my poor intelligence, I beg the excellent to forgive all faults, such as contradictions and non sequiturs. Through the virtue from this, may all living beings gain the ultimate and conventional altruistic intention, and thereby become like the protector Chenrezig, who dwells in neither extreme, not in the world, nor in peace. Good morning, everyone. For anyone who's not familiar with this little book, please feel free to take one of these as White Lotus's gift to you. This is composed by a Tibetan monk in the 13th century, 12th, 13th, I can't remember, Anukchul Togme Zangpo. And it's considered to be like the nub, the essence of what is called the Dalai Lama's favorite book, Entering the Bodhisattva Path, by this great Indian monk, like in the 700s, 600s, Shantideva. Shantideva is a Sanskrit name that he had. It literally means peace of the gods. Gaur Rinpoche has handed out, I would guess, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of these. He's had it translated into Spanish, Ukrainian, Russian, Italian, Hebrew. I mean, it's just amazing. And he says that the entire Buddhist path can be found in this little book. So it's really something wonderful just to read through it once a day. When you have situations arise in your life, it's a guide because you can go, what would the bodhisattva do? Bodhisattva, bodhi means awakening. Sattva, is generally translated in English as a being. So it's a being on the path to awakening, or a being who is motivated by awakening, or a being who is awake to some degree. Lama Tarchen, my beloved teacher, said that there's like a scale of 1 to 100 bodhisattvas. Before a very deep realization, you're like a bodhisattva in training. But that's not to be diminished, because it is so rare. It's taught that in order to the most favorable situation, in order to realize the truth of our mind, in order to come to full Buddhahood, the most advantageous situation is what's called the precious human body. And they list 18 factors. And it's so wonderful because you can go through those and you can say, man, my life is falling apart. My wife just left me. My kids hate me. I just lost my job. Everything is going wrong. You can go through those 18 factors and you say, you know what? I have all 18. One of the greatest lamas in the 19th century, Pato Rinpoche, said this precious human body is so rare. He says, if you look at all the stars, and this is in Tibet, at 18,000 feet at night, no light pollution, no lower atmospheric pollution, nothing, just, the immensity of the stars. He says, compared to all those stars, the precious human is like the stars that shine in the daytime. In another way, he said, you can pick up a handful of dry beans, throw them on the side of a barn. The number that stick are representative of the proportion of lives that are precious human lives. So we as human beings actually have this tremendously fortuitous mix of suffering and blessings. We have enough suffering that we're motivated to do something about it. But we have enough leisure and blessings and mental space that we can actually work on it In other extremes, for instance, if you're in a situation that's not a precious human life, or your animal realm, or hungry ghosts, or hellish beings, the suffering is so overwhelming that you can't think about anything else. Your mind doesn't have any space. But on the other hand, if things are just too ducky good, like in the God realms, the sensuous God realms, it's just, when things are really going well, we just ride with it. And then we think we deserve it. And then we think we've created it in a material kind of way. And so we lose the opportunity. Buddha said that the greatest suffering, the most poignant, sharp, immediate suffering all the realms of existence is that of one of the God realms, the sensual God realms. So they're still gross enough that they're attached to form and that. But everything is just wonderful. They express it as saying that they're wearing, you know, silken clothes and wonderful flowers, and everything is fragrant, and they're so sort of advanced that they communicate in song, and they even have sexual congress by glance. No need to get down and dirty. This is just like such a wonderful, wonderful existence. And they live for like, 1,000 years. I mean, it's just everything is just going right, right? But at the end, when your positive karma runs out for one of those gods or goddesses, it's said that the flowers, their leaves, start to rot and smell. And the other gods, at this level of sophistication and beauty, the idea of rotting smell is just like, beyond, beyond. So they're completely excluded from everyone and everything they love. And then because they are gods, I mean, they have a higher kind of power that they haven't been utilizing, they're able to see where their next rebirth will be. And of course, it's going to be lower. So they're losing everything. This is said to be the sharpest pain, the Deva realms. And just as an aside, Deva, this Sanskrit word meaning this type of god, um, it came to us in English, diva, the divas in opera, or someone who's acting like really, really arrogant as a diva. That's the same word. But nonetheless, so we are in this situation where we have tremendous power and opportunity, but it's occluded. It's covered over. We don't realize our own true nature. The Buddha realized this, came to his great awakening, and then after his great awakening, hesitated to teach. And why did he do that? He had come to the highest meditative states that the teachers in ancient India had, as high as you can go in kind of I don't want to say materialistic way, but in a way that is still sort of lost in appearances. The highest state there is said to be neither perception nor non-perception. This is the highest vihara, the highest temple of Brahma, the greatest god of India. Neither perception nor non-perception. But either that it's still neither nor is still a subtle, subtle, subtle attachment. Buddha rejected that. And he went further and came to his great awakening because of he saw you could be in some completely wonderful, peaceful state beyond suffering. And yet, all those dreamlike beings are suffering. It's said to be like the mother who sees her child having a nightmare. She knows the nightmare is not real, but for that child, it's absolutely real. So what does the mother do? The mother wakes up the child and wakes the child up with an embrace, total loving kindness and compassion. Because the child is not thinking about shunyata, emptiness, bodhisattvahood, none of this stuff. The child is just right there, but can understand love and compassion. My cat can understand, even when she rejects me, and understands loving kindness and compassion. Because if I have a negative thought, she's running away even faster. So Buddha then hesitated to teach because human beings goof it up. We can see, in our ordinary lives, it's just so sad, the suffering that goes on. because we're put in impossible situations. It's one thing to say, I'm going to be nonviolent. And if someone shows up and wants to kill me, go for it. I'm just not going to respond. But when you have a child and someone shows up on the door and says, I'm going to kill her, you can't do that. That's not compassion. So there's a greater compassion that doesn't look like compassion. It's the compassion of a doctor who's slicing open a body. It looks like the most inviolate thing to do. But the motivation is completely different. And yet for all of us, we're stuck in this realm of appearances where the appearances are the absolute truth to us. We do everything I can trust in these appearances. I'm a materialist. I can trust this. I know this. I know this. Look through my telescope. I can see that. That's absolutely true. And the rest of it, well, we just don't know, but doesn't matter. But the truth of it is, it does matter. We see the waves on the surface of the ocean. Sometimes it's calm. It's very beautiful. Sometimes it's a little bit choppy. Sometimes it's a tsunami. But what we don't see are the depths of the ocean. And this is what the Buddha sought to teach. So he wasn't going to teach because human beings, he said, have this way of corrupting anything. Human beings take the highest teachings, pervert it for fame and gain. And we've seen this in our own lives again and again and again. And when you see it with that kind of dissatisfaction, this is the first noble truth, that life is dissatisfactory. There's a technical term called dukkha. And what that actually was used in Sanskrit, dukkha was the situation when you had a ox cart with, those big wooden wheels and an axle connecting the two wheels. You got to have an axle, right? Something to rotate on. But there are times when the axle is a little bit off center. So the ox cart's going somewhere, but stress, friction, you got to work to keep it on. And if you let it go on its own, it's going to go in the wrong direction. It bumps into other people. You're pissed off. That's our state, our unenlightened state, dukkha, this dissatisfaction. And he called this, it's come down to us as the first noble truth, this recognition that everything is like, oh my goodness, my usual trips are not going to do the job. They don't have the power, the skill. Buddha basically taught two things, the Garam Rinpoche says, that cause and effect and emptiness. Emptiness meaning the great truth, wisdom, the way things really are when we see with our eyes fully open, the way things really are. And when we know, we do the right thing. When my car breaks down and I look trying to pretend like I'm macho and I know what I'm doing, I open the hood. If I start playing around with stuff, I don't know what I'm doing. Cause and effect, I make it worse, even though I'm trying to make it better. But with knowledge, you can do the right thing. So wisdom and cause and effect. This is expressed as, what is wisdom, Garam Rinpoche says? It's regarding this whole world as dreamlike. So it's the dream that that child is having of a nightmare. But it's not the whole story. So that's the dream. If we start regarding everything as dreamlike, suddenly it becomes workable. We're not getting stuck in different, some jerk appears. You're not like focused there and locked into that where your thoughts are again and again and again and again. Instead, you see the spaciousness of the mind. It's an appearance arising. And what's the other side? There's dreamlike and all mother sentient beings. Every being, you train yourself to consider that every single being, earthworms too, have been your mother. And we'll get into that a little bit of how that's developed. But my point is that Buddha taught how to come to our own inherent wisdom, enlightenment, bliss, happiness, all of these things, liberation from suffering. And that first noble truth, it's called the first Aryan truth. So we're so related in this whole great family of Indo-European languages, Sanskrit, English all the way down there, all the Romance languages, also Persian. Iran is the name Arya. So immediately you start to see how you're related to people rather than how they're fundamentally different from you. It doesn't really change the situation, but it changes so much the effect and the motivation. Because instead of, fighting people as being our absolute enemies, it's more like, Mom, you're really screwing up. or whatever. You can always get into debates about what's right and what's wrong to do in a worldly sense. But my point here is something deeper. It's the underlying motivation, because it's the only way out of this situation we are. The only way out. It's not fighting amongst the battle of the bands and the battle of the appearances. That goes on. You have to relate to other people, all sorts of things. It's not a rejection, but the Mahayana is this tremendous embrace of reality, discovery of reality. And then things are seen in their proper perspective, and you do things in a more sensible, a better way. But at the same time, because of the development of wisdom, it's not a ego clinging way. I mean, the example that one Chinese master gave of the bodhisattva's activities, it's like reaching for your pillow in the middle of the night. There's something slightly off, your head's off the pillow. The bodhisattva just reaches for the pillow. There's no like, how wonderful I am reaching for the pillow. And I want to start a political party called Reaching for Pillow People. There's none of that. It's just natural, human. Someone's crying, you respond. You're not thinking of who they are, how they're related to you, what's in it for you, all that stuff. It's completely spontaneous and natural. But of course, we don't live that way. We start out by seeing the suffering that's out there. It's tremendously positive. There's so much what's mistaken as wisdom is people just not giving a damn, being equanimity. They think it's not equanimity. It's closing their eyes, because seeing suffering is painful. And underneath it all, we realize that's where I'm going too. I'm in that same situation. I am not exempt from that. We go by the car wreck on the highway and we all slow down and look, and there's a perverse kind of fascination. That's what the newspapers are full of. All this kind of suffering of others that we can, in a strange way, we're kind of into it, but not completely. It's a mix. But that's what we are as human beings. We're very social, concerned about others. Even if it's only a way to laugh at others, we're still concerned about them in this perverted way. So we have that. But to go deeper, when we see the suffering outside, the next step is meditation, where you start to see the dissatisfaction within. You sit for 10 minutes and, oh my goodness, I can't keep my mind on the simplest thing, even just my breath, which I'm just doing. If I were knocked out right now, I'd still be breathing. I don't have to think about my breath. I can do it. It's a wonderful support for meditation. But meanwhile, my mind is off in Mars. My mind is off to, oh my goodness, I think she didn't like my haircut. This is what we do. So one Lama said, for instance, we think that our mind is clear, right? And he said, it's like the shaft of light comes in right now into the room. And this room looks like it's clean. Oh, I'm breathing. This is great, pure air. But when that light comes in, wisdom, you see all the dust motes dancing around. And then you go, my goodness, I didn't know any of that was there. It's the same thing with meditation. It holds up a mirror to where your mind is actually at, how you're functioning. This can be tremendously discouraging to people. People see all this and they think there's something wrong with themselves. Oh my goodness, my mind's a mess. I can't do this. This is too uncomfortable. So what gets you through those difficulties? Well, it's the First Noble Truth. It's recognizing that our state is one of dissatisfaction. So revel in it. Why not be dissatisfied? You're a 100% human being. But it's the recognition of that dissatisfaction plus the confidence, the faith. The Buddha wasn't a madman. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't insane. He said, there's a way out of this. And it's right here, right now. It's by looking into your mind. So this is such a powerful thought. And it's so universal that it's for everyone. Whether it's, someone, I don't know, is living in the rainforest, or someone's going to be shooting to Mars on some machine or something. I mean, it's universal because it's talking about reality itself. And so what do we get? 2,600 years of teachings in that. I mean, it's awesome, really, really. It's really awesome. So this is just a little verse from the Tantra containing the actual meaning of the great perfection. The great perfection, Dzogchen in Tibetan. is considered like the highest kind of teachings. And so this is from that text. By following the elephant's footprints, the elephant is found. If one tries to find the king of wisdom, first one has to go with ordinary mind. Through ordinary mind, if one searches for the meaning, then one definitely finds the self-awareness wisdom king. But not grasping at finding this wisdom king is freedom from clinging. Whatever is free from clinging is not ordinary clinging mind. It is self-occurring wisdom body. Not originating from ordinary mind, Buddha is found. So again, by following the elephant's footprints, the elephant is found. This is the great discovery of Mahayana Buddhism. You don't have to be someone different than what you are. You use what you got right now because we have this precious human body. We have everything we need. And so by this process of meditation, study, and practice, looking at it, we're seeing our shortcomings, our mistakes again and again and again. And happily, there are things we can rely on. You look at 2,600 years of these Dharmic teachings, and then happily, we've had the situation of meeting great teachers. And in that, you start to see how it functions. And you see compassion beyond your own compassion for yourself. And that is very, very humbling. But by following the elephant's footprints, the elephant is found. All of this is out there. This great Buddhist teacher at Nagarjuna in the 200s, I think, in India, formulated these teachings called Madhyamaka, the middle way, the way between the two extremes. One of just going for everything in grasping, and the other is rejecting everything with some sort of false idea of purity, rather the middle way. And he talked about conventional truth, relative truth, and absolute truth. The absolute is gained by the relative. So by following the elephant's footprints, the absolute, the elephant is found. Because we are not apart from our true nature right now. And in this whole mess of appearances, this whole cacophony of phenomenon, inner and outer, there are some things that are valid. It's a very high state to see that your hatred is actually pure in its nature. But we can get there. We can work towards that by what one? By study, realizing that hatred always ends up with bad stuff. So I'm just going to stay away. This is said to be like Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche said, this is like you're walking through a forest of poisonous trees and there's poisonous fruit. And so what's the practice? The poisonous fruit is your hatreds and all the afflictions that bind you, that cause suffering, that cause you to never get beyond yourself. He said that the practice there is to take a sharp, heavy axe and just cut down that tree. So that poisonous tree, which are poisonous emotions, you can just chop it down, falls down, done. You just don't go there. When the poison comes up in your mind, we learn to recognize it. Hatred comes, I just don't go there. Jealousy comes up, I just don't go there. You're not dealing with it at all, but you're just staying away from it. The axe is heavy because why? Because it is concentrated. It's shamatha. It's the tranquil mind, not the distracted mind. It has weight. So when you have a little weight of some concentration behind you, there's more power, but it's also sharp because you're not doing it wrongly. It's the incisive intellectual understanding of vipassana, how things really are. So you just chop it down, and that works. But that doesn't take you all the way to Buddhahood. It just takes you freedom from suffering. So the next step is, we've gotten used to that to some degree. We're walking through the same poisonous forest, same poisonous trees. But now we actually take a little bit of the fruit that they're producing. So when anger, which is the fruit, is a stimulus for us to what? To practice its antidote. And the antidote is patience. And so forth with all the different poisonous emotions, which usually result in negative behavior. Now we're using them skillfully. So when anger comes up, I have the teachings, all beings have been my mother. Immediately it's lessened. It's just lessened. To totally hate that other person, you have to feel that they're completely alienated from you. You SOB, get out of my life, get out of the universe. This total alienation. But of course, there's never a total alienation, or else you couldn't even be perceiving them. But nonetheless, that's how we act. So this now leads us to Buddhahood, training ourselves in recognizing the poisonous emotions and then doing the antidote to them as it arrives. That's what our little book is about in the outer level. That's what it is, again and again and again, the antidotes. And that is a bodhisattva. Again, bodhisattva, wisdom being, awakening being. The Tibetans translate it as awakening warrior, because we are at war with our own afflictive emotions, but not in the way that we're hating hatred. Rather, we're really conquering hatred by practicing vast love and compassion and patience. So we're trained. But then there's another step, and this is what is represented here. This practice here, we have a particular lineage. And Americans hear that, and it sounds kind of like, oh, that sounds exclusionary. But no. It's like if you want a degree, you have to pick something like physics or chemistry or English. You have different threads leading to that degree and that are part of it. You experience the fullness of Buddhist teachings through lineage, because they've all embraced the totality of it over all these years. But you get it in a way that is meaningful. You start to see the different facets of this great jewel, and you love all those different facets. But you're not just trying to cut one facet away from the jewel. Obviously, it doesn't work. But finally, the fullness of the teachings we're talking about here is called the extraordinary Mahayana, also called Vajrayana, Tantrayana, Mantrayana, all these different terms. But now you're walking through the same poisonous forest, poisonous fruit. But now you take a big bite of that fruit. How can that be? There are skillful methods that allow you to use the energy of your afflictive emotions, your poison. It's transmuting the poison. It's not just using it as a stimulus to do the opposite, but rather you're jumping right into it, but with purity. A wrathful appearance, for instance, but it's totally compassion. In the practices of some of these wrathful-looking Buddhas, they look so scary, but the mantra is like something that's completely sweet and beautiful. You want to do nothing other than just say that mantra for the rest of your life. So the skillfulness is tremendous. In this final step of the Vajrayana, it's said, although men and women both can come to Buddhahood in their present bodies, the female body is said to be superior in this kind of practice. I have no idea why, but the Tibetans say that right and left, the left is feminine, is wisdom. So I think underneath the wisdom, it's not really more profound than the skillful means or compassion, but it's the absolute truth. And so it represents that. But nonetheless, by following the elephant's footprints, the elephant is found. And so for us, the wonderful blessing that we've received here is that I can see the elephant's footprints. I have to have confidence that there's an elephant that made those footprints, but I can do that with my reasoning mind. I can look, well, this is too big, and mice have only footprints. There can't be a mouse. So you can go through a whole process. In a sense, you're exhausting your conceptual mind. And in exhausting our conceptual mind, we learn to use it properly. Someone said, for instance, the thinking mind is a tremendous servant, but it's a terrible master. My daughters are both academians, one at Yale, one at Sanskrit, one at Stanford. You see, smart girls, skips generations. But nonetheless, they live in academia. Now, for someone like me, you say, oh, this is really wonderful academia, how wonderful these people are, so intelligent. The delusion there is worse than it is on the street. I mean, when I'm dealing with my clients, in the inner city, they got more common sense than half of our professors. They're living a real life. So we don't have any false refuges in samsara. You can't just say, if I have a degree, then okay, now I'm liberated. Or if I have a whole bunch of money, I'm liberated. Or if I'm dirt poor, then I'm liberated. This is what the Buddha faced so long ago. We're in a real kind of dilemma because we don't even see. But in each one of us, there is this spark. There is this something's not right here. And yet you can't even think that something is not right in a fundamental way, except you're already coming out of your point of wisdom because you can't see imperfection unless there's perfection in comparison to that. So even in a dualistic way, we're not wrong fundamentally. The greatness of the Dharma is it gives you the tools, what to do. And this is, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And the other great thing is that it's not blind faith. You can have a teacher give you, because there are teachers out there who they can see what your makeup is. Said to be 84,000 different kinds of teachings and practices, because there are 84,000 different kinds of negative thoughts that people have. And to the degree that they are emphasized in one mind or another, 84,000 different kinds of people. But nonetheless, the great skillfulness of this is that it's all 84,000 methods. There are teachers who can see basically what you need. Here, do this. And in my own limited way, I can tell you that's experience with me. Teachers said, here, do this practice. And I was thinking to myself, I don't have any interest in that practice. I never read about it. I don't want anything like that. But it starts out that you have enough confidence in that person. Dalai Lama said, generally you take 13 years of working with a teacher before, you have that kind of confidence. But there are no rules in this stuff. You can show up and have never heard of Buddhism before and yet be at that point where suddenly your confidence is there. But what I like to communicate is that there isn't anybody who comes in contact with this who isn't qualified. You just can't. It's too rare. It even says, like, there's examples of the person who came to bray but stayed to pray. Even a strong aversion to the Buddhist teachings can actually be a positive sign, because it's something's grabbing you. It's deep enough that it's really kind of upsetting. Now, I don't want people to be upset about the teachings, but my point is that step by step by step, you're testing. It's never blind faith. Just do this and forever. You're always skeptical. And because of the meditation, you start to recognize your negative thoughts come up. Just a negative thought. It's not some overwhelming thing that you have to knee-jerk reaction to. That's our samsaric way. In the old days, before we had much experience with him, Lama Tarchin came here and I was giving him a ride from the airport back to the Dharma Center. And I had all these negative thoughts come up as I was driving. He's just sitting there, I don't know if he was doing mantra, looking out the window, whatever he was doing. And I was having these thoughts like, this guy's obviously a fraud, because I hadn't invited him here, right? He just somehow came here through serendipity. And this guy, I mean, what, just all these unbelievably. I think it was Edgar Allan Poe who talked about the power of the perverse. He says it's that quality in us when we're standing on the edge of a cliff, we have this thought, I wonder what it'd be like to jump. It's totally upside down thinking. But when you start to see through the more and more meditation you do, oh, it's another crazy thought coming up. It's just a thought. If you don't cling to it, it disappears. And even our heavy thoughts, the ones that kind of characterize us, you might say. It's just these days it's different with digital, but when Kodak was in business, it's like a movie, frame by frame by frame by frame. They got Marilyn Monroe in frame 1, frame 2, frame 3. She's moving a little bit different, but it's still Marilyn Monroe image. And to me, it appears like there's something solid called Marilyn Monroe that's going on there. But it's just this momentary to momentary to momentary. We are that way right now. We are recreating ourselves moment by moment by moment due to our karma. But because of the seemingly continuity of appearances, we give it a solidity that it actually doesn't have. but the nature of it is beyond wonderful. They can tell us that. We can resonate with that somehow, and we can say, well, give it a try. Who cares? In the end, there really isn't a choice. One great teacher, Zemester Dogen in Japan, said, seeking refuge, seeking protection in the Buddha, the Dharma, his teachings, and the Sangha, the practitioners, is not something that people naturally seek out, but in the end is the final refuge of all. Kind of like that, and that kind of helps with commitment and practice and everything, because always, what's the alternative? I mean, when Gretchen and I were coming of age, there were all during the 60s and that, all the strengths and minuses of that. And I remember this bumper sticker that said, "He who dies with the most stuff wins." And if you can reject that, you can still get as much stuff as you want, but you're not believing it's going to liberate you. One statement from Dogen here, too, called the Four Horses. This actually refers to something that happened on the last night, or very close to the last night of the Buddha's life. We don't really know, but he was traveling seemingly back to the place where he was born, Lumbini in Nepal. So he was on his way from northern India, walking towards Nepal, and passed away at a place called Kushinagar. And he was suffering from rather intense back pain, apparently. He was lying in this little hut that they had for him, and his monks were like guarding him, trying to protect him. And out of the Indian night came this non-Buddhist yogi. And he had a question. He wanted to talk. Through his psychic abilities, he knew that a Buddha was nearby, located him, wanted to ask him some profound question. And the monks who were protecting the Buddha, like their guards, so to speak, said, no, you can't see him. It's time too late. And then they hear the Buddha from within saying, let him in. Okay. And he went. The man was in there, asked the Buddha his question, and had an interaction with the Buddha, it's believed, in silence, and then walked out back in the Indian night, enlightened. And the two monks, especially, there was Ananda, there was Shariputra, which means the son of Shari, the mother is the material lineage, Shariputra, and Maudgalyayana. Shariputra and Maudgalyayana were brothers. They said, "What's up here?" They went back to the Buddha and said, "What's going on here?" They could sense his enlightenment of this yogi and what had happened. But Maudgalyayana, who was known for his psychic powers, says, I checked him out when he came. We went back 100,000 lifetimes. He didn't have any connections with any Buddhas at all. And the Buddha said, that's true. But if you went back 1 billion lifetimes, you give a flower to a previous Buddha. And that today manifested as his enlightenment. So this is Dogen, I think, summarizes that story. One day, a non-Buddhist visited the Buddha Shakyamuni and asked him, what is that which is neither spoken nor unspoken? Think about that. What is that is neither spoken nor unspoken? The Buddha remained sitting silently for some time, whereupon the non-Buddhist prostrated himself before him and said in praise, Bhagavat, that means the world-honored one, Bhagavat, how wonderful! As a result of your great compassion, the clouds of my delusive mind have vanished, and I have realized enlightenment, unquote. Saying this, he respectfully venerated the Buddha once more and departed. After his departure, the Venerable Ananda asked the Buddha, what was it that caused that non-Buddhist to say he had realized enlightenment and praise you as he did? The Buddha answered, a good horse runs when it sees even the shadow of a whip. From the time the Bodhidharma came to China to this present day, numerous masters have used this story to give instructions to students of the way, some of whom quickly understand it and come to believe, while others take many years. We should clearly realize that the The Buddhas have expounded the Dharma in two different ways, with speech and with silence. Those who have realized enlightenment on the basis of either speech or silence are all alike, like a good horse that runs when it even sees the shadow of a whip. Those who realize apart from these two ways are the same. So the other two ways are you run when the whip touches you, and when um, then when someone runs when they're struck with the whip, and then also one when it's just like beaten with the whip. These are metaphors of our sensitivity to suffering. For some people, you don't start to think about these kinds of existential problems until something tragic happens. Your child dies. It's just like the world is fallen. That's like being beaten by impermanence. But for others, something goes wrong, the career is lost. That's like being struck with a whip. So until the suffering hits you personally. But others, it's just the touch of the whip. You see someone else suffering and you can imagine it touching you. But then there are those who really kind of a divine dissatisfaction, a divine connection, you might say, to the first Aryan truth, the shadow of the whip. That's enough to make us move. Okay. All right. That's enough of me this morning. And we didn't even get to how to do that. All right. So let's, where are we? Yeah, cliffhanger, right? 11 o'clock. Okay. We'll take our